Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And after Friday's disastrous press conference where the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, blamed NHS staff for the shortage of PPE, it seems that various groups representing medics may be starting to fight back a little with the news that nurses may have to withdraw treatment from COVID patients and doctors are leaving the NHS. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, with more nurses dying from coronavirus as a direct result of treating patients without the PPE, the personal protective equipment that they need, that any wealthy nation should be able to easily provide for its healthcare workers, and with the disgraceful behaviour of the Health Secretary last week, the Royal College of Nurses has suggested that nurses, as a last resort, should refuse to treat COVID-19 patients unless they are given adequate PPE for the job. And, it's quite appalling that nurses should even have to make such a threat, as no sane government would be withholding such equipment from them at a time like this, and no decent government would withhold it at any time. But nurses are dying, and many more are testing positive all the time, and they should just have PPE when treating known or even suspected COVID patients. The government itself, in fact, in its public messaging, says that anyone could carry the infection. Well, that means that anyone being treated for something else entirely on the NHS could be carrying the infection, in which case medics should have PPE as a matter of course, even if just as a precaution. A government minister, Alex Sharma, was even suggesting that nurses should not be in the position where they were having to make this call to refuse treatment. They certainly weren't blaming the NHS for the shortages, unlike the Health Secretary, however, also didn't acknowledge that the shortage was the government's fault, simply saying that they were providing the equipment needed. Well, I will believe that when I see it, because the government have had 3 months warning and has not in any of those 3 months been stocking up. If we accept that they are now, then it will be after 3 months of doing nothing. But could we accept that maybe the government have learned lessons and decided to get the PPE needed? But if that was the case, why would the Health Secretary said what he said last Friday? He knew it was going to get him into deep shit with NHS workers. Why do that if the situation was going to be resolved imminently because they've decided, we need to sort this out? The only conclusion that I can draw is that it's not going to be sorted out. The government will keep saying that they are providing the PPE and that any shortages that occur are because NHS are being stupid enough to use it. I mean, of course you're going to run out if you actually use the equipment. Makes perfect sense to a Conservative minister, it appears. And nothing will change unless the media decide to do some public good and make a massive issue of this. The government have proven time and again that they will only ever do the right thing if the media shines a harsh spotlight on them. But it's not just the withdrawal of nursing treatment that this is causing. Doctors are threatening to quit the NHS altogether over this shameful fiasco. And this is doubly self-destructive. Not only with the loss of doctors and nurses when it comes to that, and indeed anyone else working in the NHS, but, the loss of doctors from the NHS will stretch those that remain even further, just as it does when nurses leave the NHS. And that will in turn cause even more to break and quit themselves. And this isn't hypothetical. We've seen this over the last few years anyway in the NHS, as particularly nurses have left the profession, piling on more work to the ones remaining, and then more of those leave the profession as well, stretching the service even further. And all because of the government's undermining of the NHS, not only over the last 10 years, but even over the last few months. But with the current emergency, their lies about supporting the NHS are going to be exposed badly. The government has run a massive drive to try and attract more medics to the NHS. And it has been successful to a certain extent, including some people who had retired from the NHS coming back to work. Well, if you were a medic at the moment thinking about going to work for the NHS from wherever at such a time, and you were hearing of frontline staff dying because they were denied basic protective equipment, and that doctors were quitting because they are being abandoned by the government, would you seriously carry on thinking about joining? I would think you're certainly going to put off a great deal of those people who might otherwise have joined. And for my money, and as much as I'm sure the nurses and doctors don't want to do this, I think NHS staff seriously need to think about industrial action over this. Maybe they wouldn't be allowed. Maybe the government would use its emergency powers to block any such action. But if not, apart from anything else, I mean, I don't think they'd actually have to carry it out. Simply voting for one and setting the date will attract a lot of headlines. Even if ultimately the government ban it, it would force the media potentially to shine that spotlight, which is all that's needed. And I think the government potentially would then fall into line. All they need to do is sign some pieces of paper that allow groups to order the equipment that they need. Yes, we won't get enough overnight, of course we won't, when we already have shortages. But other wealthy countries are not in this position. They've had to put in extra effort into getting PPE. There have been shortages. But do you know what? A lot of this equipment can be manufactured quite easily. And when there's businesses struggling to sell the things they're manufacturing anyway, well, they could go into another line. You can produce more of this stuff when there's more demand. So other countries have been getting this PPE. We could too. And if the government won't do their duty, and the media won't either in calling government to account, then I do think that both of them need to have their arms twisted a little. This isn't a complex problem. It's actually pretty simple. Order more stuff. And if the government can't solve a problem like NHS getting the PPE that they need, and remember, it's not new designs of PPE we need. We already know what we need. If they can't solve that very simple problem, how are we supposed to trust them to manage a very complex situation, such as moving us out of the lockdown in as timely a manner as possible without risking further outbreaks? Because that's not a simple problem, that is actually more complex. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.